Joining us now is Padma Bhushan, Vedacharya, author of more than 40 books, Pandit Vamdev Shastri or Dr. David Frawley. Namaste, Jai Hind. Thank you very, very much for joining us, Panditji. My first question to you is, what is the significance of the 22nd of January, consecration of Ram Lala at Ayodhya, Ram Janmabhoomi?
Well, I see it as the long-awaited and necessary civilizational awakening of Bharat. India is not just a modern nation state along European lines, which was the Nehruvian idea. It is a great civilization with an important history and legacy for the world. Its legacy through yoga, Vedanta, Ayurveda, so many things has come out. But at the same time, India has not had a sense of its true identity, and there's been a lot of confusion and disruption. And instead of becoming Bharat in the awakening that civilization, it's become a dynasty supporting a certain coterie of people and their influences and personal needs today, and often leftist Marxist ideology.
But despite the distortions and the distortions, let me ask you, how integral is Ram to Bharat?
Well, and relative to Ram, Ram is, of course, the avatar of Dharma. He's the national identity in many ways. Even the festivals, from Ram Navami to Diwali, are based upon Ramayana. And it was more an attempt to just negate the history of Bharat, not just simply to distort it in some ways. And it was part of a whole historical distortion, starting with the Aryan invasion theory. And from there, denying there was continuity to India's civilization, seeing India as a civilization of invaders. So one invader was as good as another invader. And also it allowed people to see India in terms of the Nehru dynasty in 1947 as if it didn't exist before. And they gave their national devotion and pride to the dynasty, not to their own culture. And so there was no cultural renaissance. Now compare them with Aurobindo. Aurobindo outlined the cultural renaissance that was needed, the civilizational awakening. That could not occur under the Nehruvian idea of India. And now that is arising. If that arises, that whole civilizational power, pride, creativity, spirituality will also come up.
Partition happened, you mentioned partition, it happened on religious grounds, Hindustan and Pakistan. Could these contentious issues like Ram Janmabhoomi, Krishna Janmabhoomi, Kashi Vishwanath, could these have been settled at the time of partition itself?
Well, that is the sad thing. Even after India was partitioned in favor of Islamic Pakistan, which certainly didn't protect the Hindus at all, India did not give they didn't give any sacred sites of the Hindus back to the Hindus. And they continued the principle of British colonial rule, and even this places of worship law froze these sacred sites in India in 1947. So that was a great disappointment. And if it had been done then, there would have been no trouble at all. If 4, 6, if all these Kashi and Varanasi and all these Ram Janmabhoomi, Krishna Janmabhoomi were taken back in 1947 or at that time, no one would have cared because the Muslims had their state, partition had been done, and even the Muslim population in India had to accept the fact they were in a Hindu majority India. So all that problem would have been avoided. It was only done to protect the certain group in power, namely the Lutyens or the Nehruvian type. And as they took power, They brought in leftist historians that denied and dismantled the history of India or Bharat.
Do you believe the word secular has been debased or perhaps misused to deny Hindus their right to worship, right to access their place of astha, their right to pray?
Well, there's two things. One, secularism was to remove the control of the Catholic Church over certain countries in Europe. And then we have to remember India was not the only country to undergo independence from colonial or even from Islamic rule. The countries of Eastern Europe reclaimed their church sites, they reclaimed their culture. The Greeks, of course, also, that was a much longer battle, restore Greece. So this idea of restoring your civilization, your sacred sites, removing the indications of invaders ruling you, happened all over. Even Saudi Arabia removed the Turkish mosques because they had been under Turkish rule for some centuries. And they said that these were political monuments. So there was nothing unsecular about Hindu majorities wanting, in fact, when they were under minority rule, they were oppressed that way. When Hindus finally get a majority rule, they're told to protect the minorities and not take care of themselves. So you see, this is not an issue of secularism. It's an issue of a certain group of the society, the Nehruvian British educated wanting to stay in power, and that a Hindu majority could remove them from power. So secular has become just a political propaganda tool.
Hindutva is fascist, Hindutva is casteist. How would you respond to such statements?
Well, first of all, fascists were Italian Catholics under Mussolini wanting to give more power to the Catholic tradition of Italy. You don't need to use these terms relative to Asia. Right and left are Western terms. And European nationalism, you're supposed to be a modern nation state, was also behind World War I, World War II, and now Europe has another war via Ukraine. So it was an attempt to demonize, Hindutva was an attempt to demonize any Hindu resistance. But all these groups have been using their own resistance and their own fighting, and also to tell Hindus that it's wrong for you to defend yourselves or assert your own identity because that is offensive to certain minorities and will hurt their feelings. Democracy is meant to be the rule of the majority, and particularly the rule of a majority that has been suppressed. So you might say the Hindus did not get independence in 1947 from being the oppressed majority under foreign rule. They became the oppressed majority under a certain leftist Nehruvian rule.
But the Hindu way of life or Hindutva, is it inclusive or is it discriminatory?
Well, let's go back to what religion is. The Western religions, Christianity and Islam, believe that they're exclusive. Ours is the only faith. God is with us, and if you don't join us, then you go to hell or some other bad place. And it's our duty to conquer and convert the world, which they tried to do for centuries, and which India was one of the main targets. And for conversion, India still is. So if Hindutva people are fascist, what about all the missionaries and the colonial forces and even the Marxists? They've been trying to convert the world by force to their particular views. Hindutva are Hindus who are speaking out at a political level and wanting their rightful rights and power.
Where do you stand on Varna and Jati, Panditji? It being associated with the cycle of birth and karma and rebirth. Is it the same as caste system?
Yes. Let me put in a little broader perspective. when the British ruled India, they were the ruling caste, and Hindus were, were the brown people who had to go to servant quarters and all the rest of it. After independence, the Nehruvian Lutyens elite was the ruling class, taking the privileges for themselves, writing the books, establishing the history, and all the rest of it. Varna is an ancient idea of the division of society based upon certain functions. It's kind of like the model of the human body. You have certain people who take the role of the educators or the head, the protectors or the arm, or they're supporting the feet, or they're doing these different roles, because society should be an organic structure, and you cannot perform all functions yourself. It's true the head is at the top of the body, but the feet shouldn't, the hands can't say, I want to walk on my hands, so the head is at the bottom. So Varna, as in all the societies to some degree, even in all the traditional societies, you had a priestly order, you had aristocracy, you had merchants, and all of that. And over time, it took certain rigidity in some areas. In other areas, it changed, or Varna changed. Jati is birth. Birth has a very important role in everything. Status of birth is always recognized. The British, of course, had that. So many countries, if you have a wealthy family, if you have an educated family, differences of birth are there. But there were also the supportive extended communities in a jati. Caste is a European term from the colonial era. I think there were 18 castes in Mexico, between the pure Spanish at the top and the pure Native Americans at the bottom. But in the colonial world, all Hindus belong to the lower castes. And in the Nehruvian world, the Hindu religion is an inferior one, just as the Christian is. So there are social differences. And what's happened to Hindus in the West is because they're so successful in terms of education, affluence, high tech, there's jealousy about them. It's also happened with the other Asian students. Asian students are restricted in the number of people going to school because they tend to do well. Now, as India, Bharat, is rising as a country, this is also causing jealousy for the other countries in the world, and they need excuses to divide India, or to have it be less strong, or make it politically incorrect. Look around India. What other country is more democratic and more diverse than India? Is it China? Is it Pakistan? Is it Bangladesh? Is it Iran? See, it doesn't happen that way at all.
Shastriji, let's bring it back to Ram. Who is Ram to you? And who is Ram to Bharat?
A very good question. Now, Ram is very interesting in many ways. And of course, the thing we have to understand, Ramayana is the oldest book in the Sanskrit language. It's the Adi Kavi Valmiki and the Adi Kavya. Even Ashwagosha, who did the Buddha Charita, lauded Valmiki and the Ramayana while giving the life of Buddha. It is the oldest story in the world that's still being performed. It's the basics of India's music, dance, festivals, concept of Dharma. And Ram also appears as a great guru. We have also the Yoga Vasishta Ramayana, all the secrets there. And then you have to remember in the Indias, when the foreign invaders came in, why did they take Ram Janmabhoomi down? Because it was a symbol of pride to the Hindus. Why did the Hindus fight back for it? It was national identity. Even the dynasties of Korea had married a princess from Ayodhya, and that was a great gain for them. And what is the capital of Thailand called is Ayutthaya. And Ram. So it is a civilizational identity and story. Of course, Mahabharata is part of that at another level. And it was taken care of for years and decades. And you have to understand, invaders are wanting to establish their power and dominance. And you do that by taking over civilizational monuments. That is a long thing. So Ram, to me, is also the arising of Bharat altogether as a new century for its civilization. And even Ram, we have a Hanuman temple and a Ram temple within an hour of where we live, built by the devotees of Neem Karoli Baba. So the chant of Ram is also moving globally. And the story is being everywhere. And what is Ayodhya will be? It's going to be a great tourist site. All the people of Asia going there. It's not threatening anybody. Hindus haven't invaded any countries. Even Ram had to save his wife, but there was no history of that in the Indian tradition. Hindus are a threat to who? Hindus are the most peaceful country of all the immigrants, and they are increasing the economies of the countries in which they are going to. They have to defend themselves from China, Pakistan, and other countries, but who are they a threat to? They are a threat to those who feel threatened by a resurgent India at a civilizational level, because it has different values, a different view of the universe, and it is also teaching people a way of life beyond politics, in harmony with the universal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma.
Panditji, I have a question. How can Ram and Krishna both be apostles of Dharma when their methods were very different? Yes, they were in very different kalakhandas or yugas, but both had different approaches. How and why do they both stand for Dharma?
Dharma is not a fixed law. Dharma means doing what is best possible in any given circumstance, and often in life we do not have ideal circumstances. Sri Krishna followed the path of diplomacy as much as he could. So did the Pandavas. The only choice they were given for not going to war would be to just give up altogether and let the forces of Adharma win. Dharma doesn't mean you don't fight. In fact, the Kshatriya Dharma means you must fight the forces of Adharma, because they will not leave unless they are defeated. If you just bow down to them, you are actually accepting a surrender. And Ram also did fight. Again, he tried not to. And his wife was taken. The assault was on him. He didn't go after anyone directly himself. So I don't really see a difference there in values. I see some slightly difference in strategy. And again, we don't live in a world where everything is ideal. Gandhian ahimsa did not work by itself. You had the movement of the revolutionaries, you had Subhash Chandra Bose, you had even Gandhi. He was very good as using a verbal kshatriya, because he at least did the critical factors. There's always his famous quote, what he thought of Western civilization, and he said it would be a good idea.
Good idea. Yes.
So obviously he wanted to continue a Bharatiya tradition in some ways. And ahimsa does not just simply mean non-violence. It means doing what is necessary to reduce or prevent violence. Which means doing what is necessary to reduce the forces of Adharma. Also, and think, India is such a big country. If the Mughals wanted to build a mosque, they had a lot of open ground they could use. They didn't have to go through the main Hindu temple sites to do it. If it was a matter of devotion to Allah, it didn't require that it's done in that one place. It can be done in so many places. So obviously there was other motives behind what they were doing. They certainly weren't raising secularism. They certainly weren't trying to say we honor all religions. They were saying we're asserting our political supremacy by humiliating a culture at its main cultural sites.
Very well put there, Panditji. But my final question to you, are we as a nation on the right path, especially under the current leadership, Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
You are definitely on the right path. You had the decades of the Nehruvian path. They didn't stop communal riots. They didn't bring peace. They didn't gain even the respect of Pakistan to go, to stay back and not attack. They also did not raise the civilization of India. They were essentially following a Marxist ideology in what they did, and the socialist economics was a disaster. The industrialists left Calcutta because of them. They lost power because of them. Their Soviet model did not raise India's economy. And it also didn't increase India's trade. And it didn't increase India's political respect in the world.
Indeed.
I have to, it's a funny thing to say, but you have more pictures of Modi hugging major political leaders in the world and them hugging him back than all the Gandhis, I think, put together. And even those who may not be happy with India rising are forced to respect India. India is now at the forefront of ecology, also technology, spirituality, economics. Look at the infrastructure. How come the Nehru dynasty in so many decades couldn't build good roads in the country? Look at all the roads that have come up under not only Modi, but Nitin Gadkari and the renovation of the country in so many ways. Ayurveda's come up because it's getting support. International Yoga Day has come up because of Modi. And so it's very important that as Bharat rises, Modi's brought more, what is this, electricity, water, gas to the poor, infrastructure, education accounts for the women. If all these groups had been supporting democracy and equality and raising the poor, they would have done it when they were in power. They just gave money to the poor at election time to buy their votes so they could stay in power longer. And then India remembers, don't worry about what the West is saying about India so much. They've always been critical. The colonialists are going to be critical to rule over you. And if India is rising, that's going to bother them. And India is going forward today. It is the only ancient civilization that has survived colonialists, missionaries, and all the rest of it. And it is one that still has a vision going to the future, because our future is universal, and it's not just democracy, it's honoring all of life as sacred, and as Upanishads say, seeing oneself in all beings. That's what the Hindus teach, not caste. Purusha Vedam Sarvam. The Purusha is everything. You are the universe. That Purusha, that self is you. Hari Om.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pandit Vamdev Shastri, Dr. David Frawley there, taking the right stand. Thank you so much. With that, we call it a wrap on this edition. Stay with us. Brass Tacks follows.